El doctor Brooks Agnew ha viajado por todo el mundo en busca de evidencias arqueológicas y registros sobre la historia de la Tierra antigua, que analizó en una serie de libros de 4 volúmenes titulado El Arca de los Millones de Años. Ha descubierto que una raza de extraterrestres llamados los Ángeles Caídos en textos antiguos, incluido el libro de Enoch, estableció una raza de gigantes llamados Nephilim, que se convirtieron en una fuerza corruptora en las primeras civilizaciones humanas. Él cree que los Nephilim no fueron completamente exterminados en el gran diluvio universal y regresaron. Desde entonces han sido agentes de ángeles caídos supervivientes que manipulan a la humanidad a través de religiones, guerras y corrupción. Yo no estoy de acuerdo, pero veamos lo que tiene que decir el Dr. Agnew, que afirma que 4 de los 200 ángeles caídos originales continúan operando en la Tierra en lugares como la montaña Cheyenne, Colorado, la Antártida, el Medio Oriente y Asia. También ha investigado extensamente la literatura de la Tierra hueca, Tierra interna, y ha llegado a la conclusión de que se puede encontrar una entrada en el Polo Norte geográfico y en otros puntos del planeta. Finalmente cree que la humanidad sobrevivirá a los esfuerzos de los ángeles caídos a través de los Nephilim y las élites corruptas para manipularlos al dejar de apoyar guerras interminables y optar en su lugar por la paz mundial.
Say your research on the Nephilim, the Sumerian records, biblical records. I mean, some of that fieldwork. Did you go to some of these libraries in that region?
Oh yeah, we went to Egypt and China and Japan, Mexico. We traveled as many countries as we could, and what we found was evidence of an ancient civilization that wasn't the Egyptians. It was a long time before them, and we found lots and lots of evidence in every culture that we went to of giants and of interaction with what they called the Shining Ones. These they were not really called extraterrestrials, but they were called like off-worlders in their language. And they would come to their culture and teach them things like space and architecture and animal husbandry and agriculture and of course war. And we thought that the theme was very common, and also some of the aspects of them were very common. And we found that not only was there a tribe of giants called the Nephilim, but there were also Nephilim that were fallen angels. These were actual off-worlders that came here with the responsibility of watching over mankind to make sure we didn't stub our toe and go extinct, I guess. And I guess they got carried away with themselves and did what we all do. That's fall in love with Earth women. And well, the rest is a terrible history of a god getting upset with that and flooding the Earth, and that those bloodlines surviving even to this day and trying to still rule the world.
So do you want to maybe just clarify exactly who the Nephilim are in relationship to like the fallen angels? And of course you have another group like the righteous angels, and when the book of Enoch describes that. So yeah, just explain to us this cast of supernatural beings that have been manipulating, controlling humanity behind the scenes for millennia.
Well, all of the ancient writings and records that we use to write the Ark series include, of course, the Bible and as old a text and translations as we could find. And what we found is by the time you get out of, Genesis chapter 6, you're introduced to 5 races, none of whom are from here. They're all from off-world. And once you realize that, then you see the interaction between God and his creation and these other races that I guess get involved and genetically become involved with the race of mankind. And the result was, some call them abominations, some call them hybrids, but for sure they were genetic anomalies. And it didn't take long, just a few hundred years, they had pretty much taken over the world. And then you see God cleansing the world with the flood, and you think, okay, well, that's it. And then here you go, just a few chapters later, a few books later, the Nephilim are back. So you see that these off-worlders had the ability to leave the planet, I guess, while the flood was going on and then return, or to go inside the planet, protect themselves, and then come out at the end of that and reassert their influence. So this is something that they had in mind. They had a mission. They had a reason why they wanted to do this, not just for their own entertainment. It was kind of an ongoing war that had been described not only in the book of Revelation, but in other books in the Bible and ancient texts, where there was a war in heaven or a war in space, and that war ended up coming to Earth. And we're still fighting it.
Right. Well, I know there have been a number of authors, Paul Wallace and Mauro Bellino stand out, that they have been discussing or presenting a lot of biblical evidence showing that the Elohim were that the Yahweh, that being described as God in the Old Testament, that actually, he is part of a plurality of beings, Anunnaki, that have vied for power over humanity for millennia. So, where do you stand on that in terms of these different beings, and whether we call them Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah, these supposedly supreme beings, and these kind of like Elohim or the Nephilim, fallen angels? Where do you stand on that?
Well, I try to approach everything from a scientific viewpoint. I'm a data-driven person. I know that personal observation is a fact, but I prefer corroborated facts. I really prefer facts that I can validate with machinery or with technology. So that kind of drives me to maybe be more critical of these stories, but I do see a ton of evidence, not just in architecture, but also in the purpose of societies. Now, it's one thing to build nice buildings, but it's another thing to have pretty much a primitive culture. That is to say, you're hunter-gatherers, or you have limited reach with your society, maybe 200 or 300,000 people or 1 million people at the most, for hundreds of years, 500, 600 years. And yet here are these magnificent pieces of architecture that withstood everything Earth could throw at them. And one has to wonder why. It gave them no benefit whatsoever in their day. Were they doing it because why? What was the reason? And the only reason that I can validate over time is that they needed to build something that would last until today, so that we would ask, why were these things built? Because something about our presence on this earth, our individual presence, humans, we are really ancient beings. We are eons old. Even though we have normal lifespans of 50 to 100 years, we have lots of them. And over time, over eons of time, we gain experience and wisdom. And the more we can recall that wisdom and experience from lifetime to lifetime, the greater our society becomes, the greater our discoveries become. I don't think it was really until we started looking back and seeing pyramids and complexes and star patterns built out in city layouts that we started asking questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What is the purpose for being here? And what I realized that Earth, strangely enough, because we've looked for 25,000 light years in every direction in our galaxy, in pretty deep detail, there's nothing like Earth. This is the greatest show in the universe.
You roll on the line.
So all these sentient races are coming here because this is the battleground right here, Earth.
Well, okay, so we can have like a number of different visiting extraterrestrials playing these roles in creating religion. Now,
you raise a very good point because, I ask the question sometimes. You remember Columbus. Columbus came here to this continent. Who was here when he got here?
well, I mean, we're talking about the indigenous peoples of
Sure,
the Americas.
Native Americans, right?
Oh.
I mean, the Cherokee, the Blackfoot, the Apache, Lakotas, they were all here, right? What were they doing? They were killing each other. They would travel hundreds of miles and wipe a whole village out down to the last child. Why? Wasn't like there was a shortage of buffalo or fish. Wasn't like there weren't enough raspberries where they lived. It's because their gods told them to. So who were their gods? It was the ETs. It was these highly advanced beings that were living among them. So you have to ask yourself the question, gosh, if you wanted to take over the world, it'd been a whole lot easier when we were shooting arrows and riding horses, right? Than now. That's not their goal. Their goal is not to take over the world. Their goal is to make the world fight itself. They live off this negative energy. They soak it in. And the more rage that they can sow on a planet, the happier they are. And we're seeing it happen around us right now.
So, when you're talking about that negative energy, some people, Bob Monroe, talked about loosh and said that this was a type of energy that's generated. So these different extraterrestrial visitors create religions and instill this kind of war ethic into certain religions. We know that is part of the way in which some of the religions operate that you've just described. So, but then you have the countervailing religions. I mean, you have, for example, Akhenaten from Egypt, you have Jesus from Palestine, you have the Buddha that teach love and compassion and empathy. So are we talking about a different group of extraterrestrials trying to kind of like bring in a countervailing set of values and behaviors?
I think actually that was the original set. The original set was to create a loving and kind of divine, almost celestial society. But it is the overwhelming energy of these other off-worlders that come and create religions. Remember, Jesus didn't create a religion, neither did Buddha. But when the religions are created, then there is the inherent conflict. One of the things that these great teachers taught is the eternality of the human soul. And one of the things that we learn in the mathematics and in the sacred geometry of these ancient higher teachings is something called the Merkaba, or the flower of life. What we realize it's tied into a principle called the Fibonacci sequence. But the Fibonacci sequence isn't just in one direction, it's in two directions. The counterclockwise energy is known in the ancients as female energy or creative energy. It's a loving energy. It creates harmony and it creates higher understanding, care, benevolence, and charity. The clockwise energy is the male energy. It's dominating, it's violent, it's destructive. And what we see in these religions that are patriarchally oriented, that is to say they're male in their energy, is they're all destructive. They all hate all other religions. There's no tolerance in them.
There's definitely that kind of like competitive warlike element in many of the religions. But you say that those Christ-like, Buddha-like figures, they come along and they.
Como dije en un vídeo anterior, el Dr. Brooks Agnew, en una entrevista con Michael Salla, dio una información muy interesante sobre el grupo de ángeles caídos que están ubicados en bases en el planeta. Otros fueron apresados en dimensiones prisión, en puntos del planeta como por ejemplo el río Éufrates, en desiertos y en la Antártida, que entre estos seres hay 4 que mandan a las élites del poder y que uno de ellos está ubicado en la Antártida, donde los controladores van a visitarlo cuando entran en el poder. Esta información hace años que la compartí, pero lo que descubrí es que una de esas entidades es un Nephilim, un híbrido que trabajaba para la facción controladora. Se dedicaba a cazar humanos y Nephilims rebeldes. Uno de los Nephilim malignos que comandó un grupo de destrucción en contra de los rebeldes que intentaban liberar a la raza humana de la esclavitud por parte de los controladores, los Anunnakis, Elohim, etc., escapó del diluvio provocado por Enlil, el jerarca Anunnaki encargado de controlar a la humanidad para que ninguno escapara de la granja prisión. Cuando hubo una revuelta en el planeta por parte de los Nephilim, que formaban parte del grupo de Enki, Anu, el rey de los genetistas Anunnaki, viendo el peligro de la fuga masiva de humanos, pidió a su hijo Enlil destruirlos y a los que sobrevivieran apresarlos para estudiar el ADN de los Nephilim rebeldes. Enlil decidió crear una gran catástrofe colocando el satélite conocido como la Luna, que es una base Anunnaki, provocando así la subida de las mareas y terremotos. En algunas escrituras explican que algunos Nephilim no estaban a favor de liberar a la raza humana y se pusieron del lado de Enlil, del lado de los controladores, para atrapar a los rebeldes y destruir a los seres humanos. Uno de los más fuertes Nephilim que había en ese momento se enfrentó a un gran número de Nephilims rebeldes y los aniquiló. Lo mismo hizo con los humanos que encontraba. Enlil lo llamó el guerrero de los dioses. Enlil y sus trabajadores construyeron una base subterránea en la Antártida de hoy en día.
Now, you talk about the Book of Enoch, and that seems to be something that is very important for this arc of millions of years. And you describe the original 200 fallen angels that arrived. And you say that out of that original 200, 4 survived, that 4 are alive today. And you point out their different locations. So you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, the main leader of the fallen was an angel called Semyaze. It has several different spellings, but he was evidently the head of the Watchers. And then there was, Azazel, and there were a couple of others, and they had different talents. And I would also go so far as to say that I think in the book, they weren't actually killed, they were imprisoned. So they were wrapped in chains and buried in the earth or buried under the water. There is rumor that some of the deep caves along the edge of the Euphrates, that they were actually imprisoned in some of these caves, and now the Euphrates is drying up and some of these caves are being exposed. And there's a possibility that some of these angels, these ancient watchers, might be released on the earth again. I believe, and I'm not alone in this, that Semyaze is still here. He's still on the earth. And even though they're few in number, they are amazingly powerful. They have tremendous wisdom. They know how systems work. They know how to corrupt men, and they know how to make men powerful and greedy. And they know how to tap into those dark forces. And those dark forces can be very blessing to people who follow them. Don't think that Lucifer just makes everybody miserable. He doesn't. If you pray to him, he'll answer prayers and he'll make you rich. He'll give you a golden voice. He'll give you a beautiful face. He'll make the camera love your presence for a while, and then he will take you back. He always betrays. But we are seeing individuals on this earth that defy all description how wicked and how wealthy they have become and how untouchable they are. They walk with impunity. They can kill, they can rape, they can steal from whoever they want, and nothing happens to them. That's this charm of favor that comes upon them through this supernatural coverage that these angels can wield.
Now, you mentioned some locations, and you mentioned Cheyenne Mountain and one in Antarctica.
Yeah.
That was curious to me. I mean, Cheyenne Mountain is where you actually have a major continuity of government facility. And so supposedly this is where the patriots who are associated with the Trump faction, the Trump won the 2020 election faction, that Cheyenne Mountain is supposed to be the last stronghold for that. And so, but you're saying this is where one of these fallen angels has his base. So
I wrote a trilogy of books called the Birth Trilogy. And in that trilogy, the unconquerable force is Semyaza, and he's holed up in Cheyenne Mountain, and he is commanding several generals. One of them is General Morley, who actually prosecutes the war between the planets. The two planets go to war after they separate. So I don't know this for a fact, but I know the deep places in the mountains that are protected. It's the place where, and also in Antarctica, maybe the location of one of these angels. And that's why the leaders of the world, the Pope's emissary, these powerful rich men, that's why they go up to Antarctica. It's not to see penguins, it's to meet this angel face to face.
Well, Antarctica has been known to have some of these ancient bases with very powerful forces there. I mean, the whole kind of Nazi exodus to Antarctica at the end of the Second World War and building a vast infrastructure there. I mean, there's a lot of support for that. So, and they had help, so it's not surprising that there would have been a fallen angel there. But the Cheyenne Mountain connection is a very interesting one. So that kind of like raises the question. So if you've got, out of the original 200 fallen angels, there's 4 of them that are remaining. So what does that suggest for the days that are coming?
Well, I think we're in probably the most dangerous times that we've ever been in. The weapons are very powerful. They're very fast. And a mistake would be devastating for the population of mankind. But it isn't just the destruction that would come from the release of one of these weapons, an EMP weapon or a nuclear weapon or a bioweapon. It's not just the destruction. It's the terror that comes from it. It's the fear that is spread to every society, that we really don't ever relax. We don't ever think, we finally made it. We finally have more than what we need. We can now not only meet our needs, we can maybe take a vacation. We can actually, buy a second.
En aquel entonces la Antártida no estaba llena de hielo, era de un clima tropical, tenía buen clima, se congeló después de la glaciación ocurrida tras el diluvio provocado por Enlil, glaciación que creo que fue causada mediante tecnología de modificación del clima. Inicialmente la Antártida estaba situada más al norte y el continente experimentaba un clima tropical o templado, lo que significa que estaba cubierto de bosques y habitado por diversas formas de vida antiguas. En 1929 los investigadores descubrieron un mapa antiguo que cambió para siempre nuestras opiniones sobre las civilizaciones antiguas y sus capacidades. El mapa de Piri Reis, creado por uno de los oficiales turcos más famosos, fue un mapa perdido durante siglos, creado en 1513 con el uso de mapas mucho más antiguos, que se dice son anteriores a numerosas culturas antiguas. La información más impactante presenta en el mapa es el continente de la Antártida libre de hielo, pero el mapa de Piri Reis no es la única evidencia que representa a la Antártida sin hielo. Resulta que otros mapas antiguos también muestran a la Antártida libre de hielo, incluso antes de que sea descubierta en tiempos modernos. Otro mapa muy polémico es el gráfico cartográfico creado por el geógrafo francés llamado Philippe Bouachet de la Neuville. El mapa de Bouachet tiene 2 versiones. Una de las cartas se cree presenta con precisión la costa libre de hielo de la Antártida, mientras que la otra no hace mención del continente helado. Se cree que el mapa de Bouachet fue creado basado en mapas más viejos, más antiguos, que se dicen que fueron creados por una civilización altamente desarrollada. La Antártida era parte de un continente donde residían humanos, varias razas de alienígenas anunnakis, genetistas híbridos, pero el punto donde construyeron la base para Ragnar, el guerrero de los dioses, era el más alejado y oculto a la vista de los intrusos. Enlil avisó al guerrero Nephilim sobre la catástrofe que iba a provocar para destruir a los rebeldes y para repoblar el planeta después de que todo se calmara, prometiéndole un reino encabezado por él y sus colaboradores. Para dicho propósito preparó unas cápsulas de animación suspendida en dicha base subterránea y en otras repartidas por todo el planeta para los Nephilim, colaboradores de Enlil, Enlil y el grupo de controladores. Llegado el momento de la destrucción, los Nephilim y sus ejércitos se ocultaron en dichas bases ubicadas en varios puntos del planeta, pero la promesa de Enlil no se cumplió y aún hoy en día siguen encerrados en dichas cápsulas esperando el momento de ser despertados para reinar en el planeta. Todo fue una estrategia de Enlil para dejar encerrados a los Nephilim y de esa forma evitar futuras revueltas como en el pasado. Algunos Nephilim encerrados en dichas cápsulas han sido encontrados y llevados a bases para estudios científicos de ADN.